In today's video, we're back with a fresh batch of NHL trade rumors. Today, we're talking about teams like the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Winnipeg Jets, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Carolina Hurricanes. We'll discuss those teams and what their plans might be heading to the deadline coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned off the top, today we have some different NHL trade rumors on some players that we haven't really discussed a whole lot. There's one of the two of these guys that we've kind of touched on before, but for the most part, these are kind of some lower profile players that haven't had a lot of attention in the rumor mill, but as we get closer to the NHL trade deadline, they're believed to be available and potentially on the move here as their current NHL teams trying to find them a new home. Now let's get started here with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now of course, as we know, the Lightning are having a phenomenal NHL season, and one player that just hasn't been able to get enough playing time is defenseman Koekkoek. Now he's really been in that boat for this year and last year as well. He's currently on a conditioning assignment down in the American Hockey League, trying to get some games under his belt just to get some playing time, and it is believed that they're trying to find a new home for him, give him a fresh start or a chance where he can actually get into the lineup and play. I mean, Tampa Bay is such a strong team, and they have a lot of experience on that blue line that it's just been very difficult for them to get him any kind of... It's been difficult for them to try to get him any kind of consistent playing time. He's only appeared in 9 games this year. He's got 1 point. Last year, I believe he played in like 35 games. So really the last year and this year, there's just not enough playing time for him to be had, and as much as they like him as a player, it's believed that he is available and they're trying to find him a new home just so they can get some actual playing time and get into the lineup and get into some NHL games. So like I said, he's on a conditioning assignment right now in the American Hockey League, and it is believed that, like I said, they're actively shopping to see what they can find for him and maybe can bring back either, potentially another prospect, draft pick, or maybe some kind of a depth player for their playoff run. Because as we know, Tampa is definitely going to be a playoff team for sure. They're going to be one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, maybe even the top team. They've certainly been one of the best in the NHL this year. They're certainly going to be a cup contender here yet again, and they have a lot of strong points to go with here. So, I don't see them doing too much ahead of the deadline, except maybe adding some extra depth. And, Koekkoek might very well bring a piece back that might help in that cup pursuit. Now, touching base here on the Winnipeg Jets, another team having a very strong season. I think we can also call them legitimate Stanley Cup contenders like they were last year. Of course, last year they went all the way to the second round, came close to going to the conference final, but not quite, fell a little bit short. It's been believed that they're getting calls on youngster Jack Roslovic, and so far they're getting an absolute hard stop on that. Roslovic is not available, but teams are inquiring. Obviously, Roslovic is still playing, a lower profile role with the Winnipeg Jets, and I guess teams based on his playing time and where things are at with Winnipeg are maybe calling to try to take advantage and see if they can pry him out. But obviously, the Winnipeg Jets are a team that are going to run into some cap situations here, like the Maple Leafs and others, even Tampa to a degree as well. Obviously, Patrik Laine is going to be needing a new contract as our RFA this summer. He's going to be getting paid big bucks after all the goals he scores. So obviously, they might have to do some maneuvering around, and they're going to have to rely heavily on a player like Roslovic even more going into the future. So he is not available, even though teams have been inquiring. Some other guys, though, that you might potentially see move might be forward Brandon Tanev and backup goalie Laurent Brossoit. Now, Brossoit's played well. I'm not really, even though his name's been out there from what I've been reading, I don't really see them actively wanting to move him. But he is going to be a pending RFA heading into next year, so he's going to need a new contract. So, obviously, depending on where everything shakes out and what he's going to need for a new contract, very well might determine if they're able to keep him or not. But either way, I think that at the very least they'd want to keep him for the playoff run. They need a second goaltender to back up Connor Hellebuyck, and he's been pretty decent for them so far this year. But Brandon Tanev, even though he's been a really solid player for the Jets, he's a really good energy guy in the bottom 6. He can kill penalties, and I really like his game, to be honest. I think Tanev plays a pretty key role for them, being between that third and fourth line unit that he plays on. But at the same time, though, he's a pending UFA. Because of their contract situations, they very well might end up losing him as a free agent this offseason. He very well might be a cap casualty. I don't think they'd want to lose him, but it's just the nature of the business and how things go. And if the Jets are going to have an opportunity to maybe try to add another center iceman to their depth piece here for the playoff run like they did last year, adding Paul Stastny, I think more than likely because of their cap situation, they very well might be more willing to deal off the roster instead of dealing futures like picks and prospects, because they don't really... They're a team that drafts and develops really well, and I don't think they're going to want to deal too much of the future away. But, a player like Tanev who might add value elsewhere might be a player they might be willing to move if it brings back the right return, depending on who it is. If they can swap Tana for a center iceman who can maybe play that number 2 spot, and even if they're a rental player too, either way it kind of changes the dynamic a little bit. It's not a guarantee they do that. They're just players that the Jets are believed to be considering making available should the right deal come along for them to kind of change their dynamic a little bit for their playoff run. But there's certainly no guarantees. I know they're happy with all these players, and certainly I'd be a little bit surprised if they do trade any of them, but they're going to have cap casualties this offseason. It might make sense to get ahead of that if they can, set themselves up for a playoff run and see where things go and deal with it, the rest of it in the offseason. Now jumping over to the Vancouver Canucks, there's a couple of their defensemen that very well might be available. One is a player who's, again, experienced but hasn't been playing a lot, and that's Michael Del Zotto. I know it's been believed that Del Zotto certainly would be available. He's a player who wants to play more, hasn't always been a regular in the Canucks lineup. So I do think that teams there is reportedly some interest out there. It is possible he doesn't get moved just from the fact that there could be a lot of other experienced D-men that are available as rental players for the playoffs. So it may not be a case where he may not rank real high on that depth list if you look around the league and players that other teams could acquire. But it is believed there is some interest, and teams are kind of waiting, saving some cap space, and if he does move, it would be near the deadline. But obviously Vancouver would be quite happy to move him along, and he'd be happy to get more playing time as well. And of course there is the other longtime defender, Alex Edler, who's certainly been in the rumor mill lately as well, which I haven't touched on in a video as of yet. It's believed that Jim Benning, the general manager for the Canucks, is not really sure. They're not really decided on if they want to trade him or not. He does have a no-move clause, so he does have control over this situation, but he's probably one of the few players on their roster that could bring back anything substantial. Now, I've seen some reports out there indicating, mostly from Canuck fans talking on social media, that he might be able to return a first-round pick, and that for the first time in I'm not sure how long, they could actually maybe have multiple first-round picks going into the 2019 draft. I'm not really sure that he would bring that kind of return, to be completely honest. But at the same time, there's lots to like about Edler. He can certainly still play big minutes. He can play a top 4 role. He's pretty decent on the power play. You can play 20-plus minutes. So I do think, he's a right shot defenseman too, which seems to be a little bit more in demand these days. So there's certainly value there for sure. And I do think they could get something decent in return. I'm not totally sold, though, that it could be a first-round pick. And if it was a first-round pick, it probably would be a team that knew they're going to hopefully have a deep playoff run, and that first-round pick's going to end up being pretty late. So either way, Edler has control over the situation. He's said it before. He wants to stay in Vancouver. He does not want to move. But even if they do trade him, it doesn't mean he could not turn around and re-sign in the offseason if he really likes it in Vancouver. And if obviously they do need some experience on that team to kind of help lead some of these younger players, it might be a case where they trade him and then re-sign him in the offseason. It's certainly a possibility. But again, with Edler, I do think there'd be a fair bit of interest because there's going to be lots of teams looking to bulk up on the blue line for the playoffs. I'm just not sure what kind of return it would be. Just not sure the Canucks are able to get a first-round pick out of that. But let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think a return would be for the Canucks on Alex Edler, and should they consider making that move? Now, I want to jump over to the Carolina Hurricanes here quickly before we go. They have a lot of decisions that they need to make, and there's a lot of players in play here, kind of juggling some balls in the air to see how they proceed, and they haven't made a lot of decisions as of yet. They're kind of weighing out offers and see how they should proceed here. Obviously, in the goaltending market, they've got Scott Darling in the minors. Hard to say if he gets another chance this year. Wouldn't be surprised if he does get more games, another chance before the season is over. Of course, they signed Peter Mrazek. They also picked up McElhinney on waivers. So they've been running with Mrazek and McElhinney, and really, I don't think that both of them finish the year in Carolina. I do think it's possible that one of them gets moved before the deadline. There's going to be some teams, as I mentioned before, talking about the Bobrovsky situation, that are going to be looking for goaltending, but there's more of them that are going to be in the market probably for a backup than for a starting goaltender. So both those guys would kind of fit that bill. If you take a look at what's going on in Toronto, for example, they've got Anderson and Garrett Sparks. Both right now have been injured. Anderson seems to be a little closer to returning. We've heard maybe Saturday, or if not, then probably Monday. But either way, definitely within the next probably 4 to 5 days, he'll be back. And obviously Sparks has had some good games, but not really sure they have complete confidence in him. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Maple Leafs decided to carry 3 goaltenders for the playoffs. So if that's the case, why not go back to old familiarity and reacquire Curtis McElhinney from the Carolina Hurricanes? They'd have to give up some kind of asset, but I don't think the asking price would be too crazy. McElhinney obviously is a pending UFA. He's familiar with Toronto. They're familiar with him. He had some good games for them. He's arguably one of the better backups in the NHL during his time backing up Freddie Anderson before. So that would not be a complete shocker. They wouldn't have to worry about losing a goalie because they could carry 3. Obviously that kind of inhibits, carrying an extra defenseman or forward, but it's certainly a path they might take, and it wouldn't be a complete shocker. But the Hurricanes are trying to decide how to proceed, but one of those goalies likely gets moved. Obviously, we've talked a little bit before about Dougie Hamilton and Michael Ferlin. Just to touch base on them here quickly, too, before we go. With Dougie Hamilton, apparently the St. Louis Blues were close to requiring him about a year ago during the offseason. This information came from Elliot Friedman in his latest blog of 31 Thoughts. So he said that he wouldn't be completely shocked to see them maybe revisit that. But at the same time, when you take a look around the Blues and all the rumors around players that might be on their way out, not really sure that really makes a lot of sense right now. He also mentioned maybe the Penguins, but again, the Penguins, I can see them doing something. Not sure that Hamilton's a guy, but he did mention maybe Michael Ferlin might be of interest to Pittsburgh as well. I think the Penguins likely could use some depth on the blue line. Wouldn't be shocked to see them add a little bit of depth to the forward group as well. And with Ferlin, being that gritty type of guy who can provide some offense, he might be an attractive piece to the Penguins too. So hard to say, but either way, I do think it's quite possible that we see the Hurricanes trade a goalie. I do think it's quite possible that Michael Ferlin goes. And if you look at Dougie Hamilton, not a guarantee by any means, but it's happened a few times now. His ice time has been down a little bit, is not having the most fantastic season. So maybe the Hurricanes are open to this. Seems kind of a little bit odd in a way. If you look back to the NHL draft in June, we saw that big trade between the Hurricanes and the Flames, trading Hanifin and Lindholm for Ferlin and Hamilton. And now we could have a case of Ferlin and Hamilton maybe not even being Hurricanes by the end of the year or by the start of next season. Certainly, a difficult situation in Carolina. And obviously to see Lindholm especially lighting it up in Calgary the way he is. Hanifin's having a decent season as well. So, I think from a Canes fan perspective, at least, that probably stings a little bit. But, at least on paper going into the year, the trade looked pretty good. And for right now, I guess it kind of still does. They also got defenseman Adam Fox, who was playing college hockey in the United States. It's believed that the Flames did not feel confident they could get him signed once he was done playing college hockey. And maybe if Carolina can get him signed and get him out of the deal, even if they trade the others and bring back some other assets, even if they're not as significant, it still overall might end up being a decent deal for them. But to see Lindholm light it up with Monahan and Gaudreau, I'm sure from Carolina's perspective, it really kind of stings to see that. Adam Fox might be the wild card in all of this because he does look to have a ton of potential. And if he turns out to be a great puck-moving defenseman like he's expected to be, then maybe long-term it will be okay. That is all your NHL trade rumors for today that we're going to be discussing on those 4 teams. Certainly leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these players, their availability, and where they might possibly end up should they be moved. And we can continue the conversation in the comments section. If you're new to the channel here, hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there is plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. So if you're new, hit that subscribe button, and if you like this video, give it a thumbs up before you go. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you very much for watching, everybody. We will catch you next time.